All right, guys, welcome back to the human reproductive system. Today is the ladies' turn. Last time we talked about the male reproductive system. Just a quick refresher. We talked about how it is a transport system. Men create sperm, and they need to transport that sperm into the female's body in order to inseminate the egg. Right? To fertilize is another word for it. Fertilize the egg and develop an embryo. So today is the ladies' turn. We're going to talk about your body parts, and then next time we're going to come back and talk about the development of that baby. All right, so let's get started. The purpose of the female reproductive system is to produce and store eggs, where men was produce and store and spread sperm, and is to develop and nourish embryos. An embryo is, if you don't know that word, is a fancy word for very young fetus or not yet at baby stage. Right? Sperm meets the egg and is a whole bunch of cells now, developing cells that is going to become a baby, just not quite there yet. Right? That's what an embryo is. So let's start, just like we did with the guys, let's start with the gland that is doing all of this production. For ladies, it is your ovaries. And you have two ovaries on either side of your uterus. This is the typical picture you would see in a textbook. However, this one is a bit more accurate. The three-dimensional picture shows that, I should say, two-dimensional picture shows that it looks like it's standing up straight, and it is not. Right? It's more like someone took the uterus and picked it up so you can see everything. This is actually how it sits in your body. So you got the ovaries up top, not underneath, and then the fallopian tubes, and here's the uterus. And then back here is the vagina. Last time we talked about the urethra, where urine escapes your body, and I said, ladies, you don't use that for sexual reasons. Your urethra, my mouse go, is right here attached to the bladder. The vagina is going to be back here behind that. So now we got some of the more obvious things out of the way. Let's talk about those ovaries. This is the location where cells undergo meiosis. And if you remember last time we talked about that, how one cell became 4 cells, and that's how we got 4 sperm. This time it's a little bit different because ladies, like I said, where men care about quantity, your body cares about quality. So your meiosis is going to be different than the male's meiosis. Another thing the ovary is going to do is the eggs, once it goes through meiosis, it's going to become an egg, and then that egg is going to have to be expelled into the fallopian tubes. So here's the female meiosis. Just like before, it started off with DNA replication. So now you have enough DNA for 2 cells. And then it's going to split, but then it's going to split again. So enough DNA for 2 cells, but you end up with 4 cells. So that is half the DNA in each one. But here's where women care about quality. Notice the size difference. In this first split, ladies, your body is going to take a bunch of cytoplasm and a bunch of good nutrients from one side and put it on the other side. So this one is going to get all the good stuff, and this one isn't really going to get much of anything. We don't even call this an egg. This is called a polar body. Your body will recycle these pieces later on. It's not really going to be much of anything. But it is still going to continue meiosis. They're going to split again. And just like last time, this side is going to take a whole bunch of good stuff from this side and create another polar body. And this one's going to split into 2 polar bodies. So you now have 3 polar bodies and 1 good cell. And that one good, very good cell becomes the egg. 1 good egg at the end of all of this. This is a picture of the inside of an ovary. I tried to find more realistic pictures of this one, but the animation ones show more detail. So it's going to start off as that 1 cell, and then it's going to start growing and developing and get more mature until it is expelled out of the ovary. And then afterwards, this stuff that is surrounding and protecting the egg is producing estrogen, and it's going to continue to do that. It's going to make those chemicals for your body while this egg carries on its course. That egg that was expelled, talking about right here, and by the way, that is called ovulation, right? That's what ovulation. I'm sure you've heard that word before. Ovulation is when the egg kind of pops out of the ovary, and it's going to land in the fallopian tubes, the tubes from the ovaries to the uterus. So this tube right here, you see my mouse move in. So egg pops out and travels, or over here, the egg pops out and travels. Yes, I do have that animated. Cool. Right. I showed 2 eggs traveling because you have 2 ovaries and 2 fallopian tubes, but the truth is you are only going to use one at a time, right? They alternate every month. So in June, it may be this one. In July, it would be this one. And then August, September, October, November, you get the idea. And some women tell me that they can actually feel which side's coming on. Like you actually get some cramps on one side of the body or the other. And I'll see if I can find a video of this one, the link in here, but inside the fallopian tube is lined with cilia, which is tiny microscopic hairs on the cells that line the inside of the tube. And those little hairs are going to crowd surf the egg across the fallopian tube and into the uterus. Typically, the fallopian tube is where you will get pregnant, and the sperm will travel all through the uterus and then go into the fallopian tube to fertilize the egg. So when it gets back to the uterus, that egg is already an embryo, which I forgot to put up. Here it is. This is where fertilization occurs. All right. Now that egg, whether it's fertilized or not, at this point doesn't make a difference. It's still going to end up in the uterus. This mature egg will stay here for about a month. Now this is where it matters if you're pregnant or not. If it is not a fertilized egg, like I said, it'll sit there for about a month, and that's about it. Actually, on average, about 23 to 26 days, so not even a full month. And at that point, it's gone bad. It has a shelf life. You know? And once it goes bad, your body needs to expel it, and that's what the period is, to get rid of that old stuff. If it is fertilized, however, different hormones are growing. And instead of estrogen, progesterone is flooding your body, and that progesterone is going to keep everything fresh. Nothing is going to go bad, and hopefully you do not flush this embryo out. We are now exiting the uterus and going out. In order to exit the uterus, there is a doorway. That doorway is known as the cervix.
Hey guys, Future Laconi stepping in here. Remember last time I talked about how males have prostate cancer to worry about, and I said women have their own issues to think about, and here's where I want to talk about that. You actually have a number of different issues to think about: ovarian cancer, uterine cancers, but a very common one is right here, cervical cancer. And that's just something that you should be mindful of. You should have regularly checked. Speak to your doctor next time you have a checkup. All right, back to the notes.
From the uterus to the vagina. If we're talking about the egg's point of view, it is an exit. If we're talking about sperm's point of view, it is the entrance for the sperm, not the penis. All right, we'll get there in a second. And then the vagina, shown here and shown over here. Yes, the vagina is an internal organ. People think that the external part that you can see is known as the vagina. It is not. The vagina is this internal area that accepts the penis so that sex can happen and sperm can go through the cervix into the uterus. So that circled part right there. And then this is where people tend to have the most questions for me. So feel free, guys, please get a hold of me during my office hours, or send me, if you are a little nervous about talking in person or afraid that someone else is going to be at my office hours, send me an email. All right, I know this gets kind of personal. So men and women alike in watching this video, feel free to ask questions. There's no shame in any of this. This is what happens. The menstrual cycle is once the uterus egg has expired, it needs to get flushed out. I said about 23 to 26 days on average. A different source told me 28 when I made these notes. But everyone is different, right? No one actually has one set number. Right? But roughly 28 days, and then the old egg is going to get flushed out, and the new egg is going to take its place. And that whole thing is your menstrual cycle. So I'm not going to go into every single detail of the experience, mostly because I have never had the experience as a male, but I am going to go through the growth and development of the whole process. The menstrual cycle has 4 phases: the follicular phase, ovulation, which we already mentioned, luteal phase, and actual menstruation. All right. And over here is a graph. Let me explain this graph. A lot of people have trouble understanding these things. All right. Down here shows time in days. So from day 1, day 5, day 14, day 28. Right? This is going to be the uterine lining. That's right, guys. There is a lining inside this uterus made mostly out of blood and some other connective tissues that is going to accept this egg and keep it protected. That is what's getting flushed out during menstruation, by the way. All of that blood, right? That's not the egg. The egg is so small that you've probably never seen it. It is roughly the size of a very small grain of salt. You can see it, but you're not likely going to. Right? What you're actually seeing is the uterine lining being flushed out, because when the egg goes bad, so does the lining, and you need to make a new lining. And that's what we have here. This shows the lining. So, and up here, it shows the development of that egg. So it starts off here, and then it starts developing all of the surrounding cells that are going to be producing the chemicals, and then ovulation kicks it out. Right? We talked all about that. So let's go through all the different phases. Oh, I forgot I showed you this picture again. So yeah, there's the ovulation. It's developing all the surrounding cells that are going to go through protein synthesis and make all those hormones for you. The egg gets kicked out, but the cells stay behind, creating hormones. Right. So you notice this kind of got faded out except for this one section. This is the follicular phase. This is just after your period. All right. You are now done bleeding. The uterine lining is gone, and you are now in the process of developing a brand new egg. So again, myth time. People think that you cannot get pregnant at this point. This is false. I'll say this again, guys. That is a false belief. There is no time where you cannot get pregnant. And the reason for that is because sperm can last a while inside of your body. So just because the egg isn't ready yet, it doesn't mean that you won't get pregnant later. When this egg is ready, the sperm might still be there. So there is no time where you cannot accidentally get pregnant. There are just times where you are more likely or less likely, but it's always possible. Follicular phase is when the body has a very low amount of estrogen, and this low amount of estrogen tells the follicle, which is what we call this clump of cells surrounding the egg, to start growing and start developing. Their job is to create estrogen. It goes, oh, we don't have enough. Let's grow and make more. And with all that estrogen, the egg is going to start developing. Also, during this follicular phase, you can see over the course of about 9 to 10 days, this uterine lining is starting to grow. You are now developing thicker walls. So as the follicle causes the estrogen levels to rise, the estrogen causes the lining of the uterus to thicken. That thick lining will protect the egg. once the egg is in the uterus. Remember, this is inside the uterus, not inside the fallopian tubes, not inside the ovary. This is inside the uterus itself. So when the egg eventually gets there, you will have a nice, soft, cushiony lining to protect it. Moving on over to ovulation. Once the egg is ready, it is going to get pushed out of the ovary into the fallopian tube. The follicle ruptures, we say. This egg is released into the fallopian tubes, as I just said, and at that point is where you are most likely to get pregnant. So you go right from the stage where you're least likely to the stage where you're most likely. And if there are sperm still there from when you were least likely, now you have sperm inside of you when you're most likely. Again, that is not a scare tactic, that is just a safety precaution. Luteal phase. The follicle without the egg is now called the corpus luteum. Right? This yellow blob right here is going to continue to release hormones. It's going to release a whole bunch of estrogen unless you get pregnant. Right? If the sperm fertilizes the egg, a chemical is released by the egg to inform your body that, hey, I'm pregnant. And this guy starts releasing a whole bunch more progesterone. If it doesn't get the egg does not get fertilized, this thing continues to release estrogen. That estrogen is going to help the egg to grow. Oh, that is messing up there. And it says the progesterone is going to help the baby grow. The chances of pregnancy are greatest within the first 2 days of this cycle. All right? Because ovulation, see here, there's not actual stage of ovulation. Right? Ovulation is part of luteal phase. People always say ovulation is the most likely to get pregnant. It's not just that moment. It is a few days after that moment. This would be about 10 to 14 days after your last period. On average, again, everyone's body is a little bit different, but somewhere in that time frame is when you are more likely to have a child if that's what you're trying to do. If fertilized, the egg will implant itself into the lining of the uterus and grow into an embryo. And again, I'm going to link a video down in Google Classroom to show that happening. It's a very long video. Feel free to fast forward. It will be YouTube video, not Edpuzzle, so you go please. If you're in my bio class, you've probably seen it already anyway. The last phase, it says the flow phase down here. It's actually called menstruation. This stage happens if the egg is not fertilized. If it is fertilized, that's a whole different set of notes we're going to go into next time. If it's not fertilized, the corpus luteum will begin to disintegrate because, it runs out of its stuff and will produce less and less and less hormones. Without those hormones, there is nothing to keep this uterine lining fresh, and there's nothing to keep the egg fresh. They go bad. The lower amount of estrogen causes the lining to break down. The lining, the blood, and the old egg exit through the vagina. That's the only exit available. And then, after a few days, the estrogen levels start to get low enough to trigger a new follicle to grow and start over. And we started where we started before. Low estrogen tells this to start growing, the follicles start growing, so you get more estrogen, and we begin anew. And that is it. I kind of rushed through that. There was a lot of detail that usually gets reserved for question and answer sessions. So if you have any questions, get in contact with me. I have office hours. All right. I will make time for you if you can't make it to my office hours. I am available to you. So please contact me. All right, this is the last chapter. We got to get this done right. All right, guys, look in Google Classroom for an assignment, and I will see you later.